Alright, this is part 7 of the Urban Farm project. In this video I'm going to be taking you through the construction of the waterfalls, the waterway and the filters that I built for the aquaponic system. There was a bit more to this project than initially I thought there would be, and there was a fair bit involved in putting all of this together. So what I'll do is I'll take you through now what it was that I did and how I did it, and I'll give you some explanation along the way. So this part of the project actually all began here while I was digging the pond for the system. When I first started the project, I had a rough idea of what I wanted the backyard to look like, but what it was going to look like in the end was going to be something completely different. Now, this hole took about a year to dig because I was doing it in my spare time, and the downside to it taking a year to dig is that it took a year to dig. The upside was, while I was actually in the hole, I had some time to reassess what I was going to be doing. And initially I was going to be carting this dirt away and doing something else, but after a bit of time thinking about it, I thought what I could do is take this dirt and retain it, and on that retained area that's been built up, actually build some waterfalls and waterways, and this is what this video is about. So here I am setting the sea channels in place for the retaining wall. I've dug all the holes that I needed. The retaining wall was for the most part about 2 feet high. This section here was about 1.2 meters high because this is the part where the one of the waterfalls is going to be backing off onto. Here I'm laying down some drainage gravel for the sleepers to sit on. And these are the sleepers that we were going to be using. Whenever building a retaining wall, something that's really important is to make sure that water has a place to leave, and the drainage from within that retaining wall is really important. So what I'm doing here is I'm laying down some piping that has holes in it, so if water falls into this area, it can percolate down and exit via that piping. Over the top there I've got some geo cloth, and on top of that I'm going to start laying some drainage gravel. So the important thing is, and this is what we're going to do all around the perimeter of this retained area, continue to lay drainage gravel and then backfill it with a bit of dirt, and then more drainage gravel and backfill it in with dirt. So the retaining wall has against it roughly about a foot of wide of drainage gravel, so it never has an opportunity for water to build up behind it and start putting excessive pressures and loads on it. It would cause problems, and if water's not in constant contact with that wooden retaining wall, it's likely to last a whole lot longer. I've left one section open for now so I can continue to bring in dirt and build up the area. The next section to talk about is the filtration system. Now we're going to be using 2 filters. One's going to be a swirl filter and one's going to be a finer particulate filter. This pad that I'm laying down here is for a 2000 litre swirl filter, and off to the right I'm going to be laying another pad down for a finer mesh filter. Here I'm preparing the piping work for the swirl filter. Now the way this works is the water's going to come down that shaft and it's going to branch out into the 2 arms that are going to be, the outlet points are going to be pointing in opposite directions and slightly down. So the whole idea here is that as the water runs down that shaft and comes out the ends, it begins a swirling motion, pushing the solid matter on towards the outside of the tank and downwards as well. And just for some further clarification here, the water that's going to be pumped into this will be coming from the bottom of the pond where the solid sediments are going to start to settle. Here I'm testing the T-section by running some water through it. Now you'll see that as soon as I start running the water through it, the bottom's going to start kicking out a bit. And that's because the water's coming out in opposite directions on either end of those arms. What I'm going to do next is I'm going to put a shroud over the top of that shaft that I'm going to be able to lock into place, and you'll see how I do this in shortly. Now now drilling a hole in the top section of a 2,000 litre tank to be able to accommodate that shaft of that T-piping. And it fits like a glove. This is what it looks like inside the tank. So you can see that the water is going to be swirling around in a clockwise motion. Now at the top there's an outlet point that's coming in at a 90 degree. That's close to the center of the tank. What the sediment's doing is it's being pushed to the outside of the tank and downwards, and the clean water's coming up and it's being caught by that 90 degree bend there. This woodwork that I've built around the tank is to support the hose that's pumping the water out of the tank, but it's also there to lock in that T piece of PVC to make sure that it doesn't start spinning around. And those two screws and the two screws on the other side that you can't see are what's locked into that shroud. So the swirl filter's done, and now it's time to work on the sponge filter. This is the cartridge for the sponge filter. I'm measuring out where the holes are to be drilled, and I'm just drilling some pilot holes now. Now I'm drilling some much bigger holes. This is where the water is going to be exiting from that cartridge. Here I'm screwing some capping on the bottom, and now I'm going to cut the cartridge down to the appropriate size. Once it's all cut to size and ready to go, it's time to mark out the sponge filter and cut it out. What we've got here now is the final bits of sponge filter that have been put into the cartridge, and this is the final product here. This now is the 1,000 litre tank that I've jigsawed out some of that top section to accommodate the cartridge. It doesn't have the sponge filter in it now, but it will once it finally goes in. This is just to measure up and make sure that it fits as it should. And it does. So basically the way the filtration system works is like this. The pond water gets pumped up into that swirl filter on the left-hand side. It goes through the swirling motion. The heavier particles get settled out of the water, and out of the top, the water overflows via that pipe that then connects onto the sponge filter, into the sponge filter cartridge that's held in the 1,000 litre tank. That then captures all of the finer particles, and then off to the right of that 1,000 litre tank, the water then goes over the waterfall. We've got taps down at the bottom of these tanks, so I can then water my trees, and if I need to empty some water out of the pond, I can do it via these taps. Now the filters are done, it's time to spend some time at the quarry collecting some rocks for the waterfall. It's good to go yourself and collect these rocks, because you can start to select the pieces that you want, that you think are going to best fit the design that you're planning. Every waterfall is going to be different, and every rock is different, so it's best to just go to the quarry and just do it by feel. Now, something I've got to mention here, when it comes to rocks that are going to be coming in contact with water, particularly if you have fish, you're going to make sure that they aren't reactive with acid. One of the ways that I tested this was that I took the rocks that were going to be exposed to the water, and I put them in a glass and filled it up with vinegar. If there were no bubbles, then I knew that it wouldn't react with acid. The problem with using rocks that would react with acid is that it will increase the pH and probably kill your fish. These are the rocks that I finally collected, and these are the rocks that are going to be going towards building the waterfalls. So firstly, what I want to do is describe how the smaller waterfall is built. This is the one that's right up against the actual pond itself. I'm laying a bed of bricks down here that's going to serve as the foundation. Now, what I'm laying here is some underliner for the EPDM liner that we've got here. It's important to put some EPDM liner down, because if you just stack rocks on top of each other, water's going to start to leak out from underneath them, If it does, and you've got EPDM liner underneath it, it's going to catch that water and it can still channel it down into the pond. These are some of the rocks I'm going to start laying out. One of the things that's really important when you're building a waterfall is make sure you've got a spirit level with you. Make sure that these are level. Otherwise, you're going to turn your waterfall on, it's going to start going backwards and you're going to have to redo everything again. If you've got a spirit level and you're angling everything as it should, you're going to have no problems. Here I'm also laying down some expander foam. This project, I used an enormous amount of expander foam. I'm pretty sure I spent about $1,000 on expander foam. The expander foam not only blocks water from going in certain places, but it also acts as a real weak type of cement. So I'm continuing on building this waterfall, and it's starting to take some shape, and it's starting to look pretty good, I think. Before we start building the next waterfall, what we have to do is set this pond in place. Now there are going to be 2 ponds up in this top section here. I'm not going to show you how I put the other one in, because once you've seen me do this one, you're going to have a fairly good idea. So I'm putting the water down, and again, spirit levels. Make sure you use your spirit level to make sure that it's falling in the right direction. I backfill, once I'm confident of that, I'll start backfilling in. And here you can see that I finally got it right. The water's flowing, and it's flowing exactly where I want it to be flowing. Once that's done, I'm preparing the ground for the waterfall. Now what I'm doing is I'm leveling it all out and just getting it nice and flat. Once that's done, I'm going to start laying bricks to actually produce the shape of what the waterfall is going to look like. First of all, it's a lot cheaper than using slate stone. But secondly, using brick as well, rather than just building up with dirt, allows you to have a real solid foundation that's probably not going to move. So I'm continually stacking up these bricks and starting to prepare the shape on which I'm going to start laying the slate stone. Again, whenever you're going to be building a waterfall, underliner and get the EPDM liner on as well. Once that's done, you've got the base and you can start stacking your rocks onto this. And again, it's just going to be a simple process of continually stacking the rocks and just trying to line them up, and a lot of expander foam. Just keep putting the expander foam in, cementing these blocks in place, and covering up that EPDM liner so it's aesthetically looking a lot better. There's that expander foam again. At some point you're going to do a test run. So I started the water flowing. The top rocks weren't set in place, and you can see the water's going everywhere. So we just had to readjust some things. Now again, what we've got is the water coming in from the pond, going into that swirl filter, getting cleaned up, coming across, going through the cartridge where the sponge filter is, and then in that top pipe, about 10,000 litres an hour is flowing over into the waterfall. In addition to that 10,000 litres, we've also got another 20,000 litres that are being pumped via that pump right there. That pump is cycling water through this pond here, and it's actually cycling 20,000 litres an hour through this clarifier here. That's got a capacity of up to 45,000 litres. The system's only about 22,000 litres. It comes up that pipe, and that 20,000 litres gets mixed in with the other 10,000 litres that's coming from the pond, and it's just constantly cycling through. What this means is that we've got a surplus 10,000 litres that needs to go somewhere, and that's where the waterway comes in. And yes, now on the back of the waterfall, I've managed to finally seal everything up and get the rocks in place. And this is the first waterfall I showed you how it flows. Now the next section is the waterway, but before we can build the waterway, I need to put in the remaining retaining wall. It's going to be a stone retaining wall that I'm going to put in. Now, we're going to have a lot of pumps that are operating here. So now we've got the extension leads going everywhere. What I'm doing is underneath the retaining wall, I'm putting this conduit, and that's where we're going to start tightening up the electrical part of all of this in some of the next sections. Now I'm filling in this channel with drainage gravel and just leveling it all out so I can start to stack the retaining wall stones on. These are natural stones. You just got to find the right ones that fit and start laying them down. And again, use your spirit level to make sure that everything's lined up and everything is on the right angle, so you end up with a nice product in the end. From this point on, it's just a simple matter of laying down the stone, getting the shape you want, and backfilling with drainage gravel. It's so important to backfill with the drainage gravel because if water starts to build up, it's going to start to push those stones out of place. If you've got drainage gravel, the water's just going to dissipate through that so easily, and it's not going to put any pressure on it. So again, continue to build up the stone wall and backfill with gravel. Here I'm just taking off any stones that are on top of the any loose drainage gravel that's on top of the stones, the big stones, so they can just sit on each other nice and evenly. After a few courses of laying the stones, they start to get a bit out of line. So I put a bit of this drainage type of sand over it, and that kind of levels it out a bit, and you just continue to put the stones on top of that. So just finishing off the final levels of the retaining wall, I've got some steps that are going to start to step up into this top section where we'll have a bit of furniture, a bit of concrete furniture we'll be putting in a bit later. This is what the retaining wall looks like. I think it looks pretty good. It's still got a bit to go, but so far so good. Now it's time to start preparing the channels. I've just dug some channels out. Now what I'm doing is on the outer edges, I'm laying down some brick just to build up the height of the channels. And what we'll be doing is, again, we're going to be putting some EPDM liner so the water can run along that, but under liner first and then your EPDM liner as before. At the end of this channel was eventually going to go the second pond that's up in this level. To connect the rubber EPDM channels with the plastic ponds, I used Ideal Seal glue so we wouldn't get any leaking at those joining points. Now it's time to start making those channels look a little more natural by putting in some river rock to cover the EPDM liner. This is where the other channel is going to go, and you'll see that at the end of it I've cut out some of the retaining wall to allow the water to flow over the waterfall. This is the channel with the EPDM liner on it, and we've got a test run going where the waterfalls are actually operational and the water's flowing through these channels now. And now I'm covering up some of the area with some river rock just to give it a better look. Speaking of better look, there's a lot of black plastic in this section here, so I was back to the quarry to get some rocks so we can start covering some of that black plastic up and give the that top section a bit more of a natural look. So I'm back from the quarry, I've got the rocks, I'm starting to cover up the black plastic on the ponds, and also I'm going to start covering up the black EPDM liner as best as I can, just to make it look as natural as possible. Our concrete furniture is finally in and it's starting to look a bit more like a usable outdoor area. One of the final bits to do here was to just cover up some of those rocks with some river rock, just the gaps between the rocks, and also just along the edges of the rocks to take away some of those sharp edges. So the final thing I needed to do was build a bridge to get over the waterway and into the entertaining area. And in the background there, I've got the wood oven I built about 12 years ago. And what's an aquaponic system without fish? So we brought in about 1,000 silver perch and we released them into the pond. So we'll have a look at a few different views of this section. This is at ground level, and we can get to see how the waterway eventually flows into the pond. This next view is from above, where we can see the zigzagging of the waterway, and again how it falls back into the pond. And finally, we'll have a look from the side, and we'll see how it all works together, how the waterfalls, the waterway, the pond, and the arbor all work together. Well, that's the video. I hope you liked it and hope to see you next time.